All right. Good morning, everybody. Let's do this. So, hey Mario, guess what? I just learned something, and that something is that there's an emergency backup option that just saved my butt because I forgot to click all the secondary output channels, and it asked me when I hit go live. It said, "Hey, what about these channels?" Like, oh yeah, what about them, huh? So yeah, we almost missed out on YouTube and Twitter this morning, and that would not have been desirable.
Yeah, but we would have had a Rumble exclusive show, which means it could have been really spicy. Anyway,
and sometimes that's the we're going to have to do some Rumble exclusives in the future. Just for the fact of doing a Rumble exclusive, we don't even need to say anything all that especially spicy, but it'll be fun. So real quick, Megan has first blood this morning. I see Patrick's with us. Good morning, brother. And Tim Lowry's watching this morning, which means he's ready to go to bed because I know he just got his ass off of work. So what are we talking about this morning, Mario? We're talking about NGOs. In particular, we're gonna be looking at this article from Zero Hedge, referring to an interview or a conversation that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy had on Twitter the other day. But let's talk a little bit about what NGOs are. Oh, hey, Sergeant Major says good afternoon because he is in Germany.
Is he on a Viking cruise or something?
No. I don't want to say too much on the show.
Okay.
But Dad is hanging out in Germany right now.
Got it.
I don't want to say much more than that for OPSEC.
Okay. So non-governmental organization, okay, NGO. So what is that? All right. Well, it's effectively a shell company, okay, that the government sets up to do the things that it cannot legally do itself. All right. Under the guise of being a 501c charity, which means that they're tax-exempt organizations, which also means that they're organizations that private companies and individuals can donate money to, basically to ease their own tax burden. Okay. Also, they can donate money to it as a way to basically launder that money if they want to, as you were going to mention later about the kind of that nebulous chain, okay, of big NGO pays for little NGO, etc. So think of it kind of in the way that how the CIA would classically operate in the 70s and 80s, okay, where they would set up shell companies and pay for them entirely to do like ferrying operations or to send money, weapons, and supplies to contra organizations, right? And they could all do all of this while basically maintaining the image that they were not directly involved. It was just these private, nonprofit organizations that were doing the work for them. They operate much the same way. Today, it's expanded beyond like the skullduggery of the CIA, using basically shell front organizations to topple foreign governments and to finance revolutions. Now it's used for basically everything, for lobbying for politicians, to support legislation, to using it to set up think tank organizations. Those are a big one, like the biggest one I can think of is Cato Institute, but there's plenty of little organizations that do studies on, say, disinformation. Does that sound familiar? So,
right. When you think NGOs, you're thinking charities, you're thinking think tanks, you're thinking activist organizations, community organizers, all that kind of, basically anything you can think of that the government's not supposed to do and is paying for, that's an NGO. And like Mario's talking about the laundering of power and authority. A large part of what NGOs are for is so that the government can spend your tax money on things that it's not allowed to spend your tax money on.
Right.
Like hostile foreign invaders.
Correct. Like hostile foreign invaders, or toppling foreign governments, or lobbying for increased censorship. Okay. Across all platforms to counter disinformation, which is their catch-all word for things that we don't want you to say and things we don't want people to hear, right? But there's been a meteoric, and the reason it's catching Doge's attention is because there's been a meteoric rise in the money being given to these organizations since the Reagan era to today, okay? it's estimated that NGOs are holding $10 trillion in private assets, all right, at this point. So nebulous, unaccountable organizations with the wielding the financial capacity of a nation state, you know what I mean? Doing whatever they want or whatever, whatever the government wants them to do passively through their back channels of control. It's in 2012, in 2012, 27% of the workforce of Washington D.C. worked for a non-governmental organization, and that was in 2012. You can imagine it's probably a third at this point. And in perennial blue states like Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, New York, in 2012, up to almost a fifth of the population of these states were employed by non-governmental organizations. It's pretty common when you see like a shitlib or something on Twitter, and then they specify, list what their work is, what their occupation is. Half the time you see them working for non-governmental organizations. It's a great vehicle to employ the otherwise unemployable shitlib indoctrinated students coming straight out of cultural Marxist seminaries in our universities, and put them right to work undermining the American people and undermining this nation. Anyway,
so
went off a little bit there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Let's go to the article for a minute. And then, before we go to the article, I wanted to talk. Okay, so you got the private sector, you've got government, and you've got NGOs. And like I said a minute ago, when you think NGOs, think charities, community outreach programs. I used to know a guy that worked for a community outreach program that provided clean needles to heroin addicts. That's tax money being spent on drug paraphernalia. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right. We've talked about this on the show many times. There is nothing, literally nothing, that the government can do that cannot be done better and cheaper by private industry. And I do mean nothing, up to and including national security. Nothing the government can do better and cheaper. Now, the caveat that I'll give you there is government is good at organizing. Sort of. And I say sort of, they're good at organizing to the extent that government as an organization at scale is good at putting a bunch of people in position to sit still and get paid to do nothing so that they're on hand when you need to just grab somebody up and send them off to do a gig. Mm-hmm. Right? Sergeant Major says, think churches when you think NGO. Absolutely. Yep. The mega churches. A big component to the NGO is they like to build themselves as non-profit. And that's one of the key problems right there. If you make the claim that you do a thing, other than like a hobby, right? So you're a wildlife photographer. You got a hobby and you don't charge anybody for it. You just go out and shoot pictures because you like to do it. If you do a thing and in any way earn money at that thing, and that thing is in any way providing a product or service to another person, you are a for-profit entity. If you're collecting money to feed the homeless, and that's what you do, you are doing it for profit. The phrase non-profit, not-for-profit, non-profit business is a lie. So it all begins there with the fact that at its core, the concept of non-profit work is false. It's a lie. It doesn't exist. It is a tax scam, first and foremost. And so, of course, like I said the other day, you got the old adage, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, that's not entirely correct. That's not pure. That's not a true statement, right? You think back to George Washington. We want to make you king. Hold up a minute. No, I don't want to do that. So even if George is the only exception to the rule, of the idea that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, then he puts the lie to the tautology that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It didn't. In the case of George Washington, it didn't. So if you could name one, then the tautology is broken. What is more correct to say is that positions of power tend to attract those who are most corruptible.
Yeah.
And so these organizations get filled up with shitlib BLM activists and trans activists and the like, and they are out to destroy everything that is good, which is America. So the thing that differentiates the three types of organization, private sector, government, NGO, private sector produces products and services and profits from that work. Government takes your money at gunpoint, produces nothing of value, takes that money from you involuntarily. NGOs receive their money either from private donations, we'll talk about chuggers in a minute, private donations, or largely from government grants. And like we said a minute ago, that is a function of the government laundering not just tax money into politically desirable groups, but laundering authority into these NGOs so that the NGOs can do the thing the government wants to do. Like Mario's example with censorship, that's a great example, and allow these organizations to do the things the government wants to do, but is legally forbidden from doing it, so that it can get around the law and pretend like it's not doing it. A great example of that is like Media Matters. Media Matters gets money from the Democrat Party, and they don't produce a thing that has value. They're not earning money off of their work. Instead, they're being funded externally, and the entire reason they exist, it was established in part with cooperation from the Hillary Clinton campaign against Donald Trump in its early inception. And what it does is it targets conservative commentators, anybody who has advertisers, to try and defund and boycott and blockade the funding mechanisms of these for-profit business entities like a Sean Hannity or a Rush Limbaugh, right? That's what Media Matters does. They conduct censorship operations on behalf of the Democrat Party in order to alter the national conversation. Cameron points out Ghostbusters hit the nail on the head. The private sector expects results. It's that great scene at the beginning where they're getting kicked out of the university for their crackpot paranormal theories, and Ray says to Peter, like, I've worked in the private sector. We've had grants and money and all kind of success here, but now we're headed out on our asses. I've worked in the private sector. Expect results, right? And yeah, that's part of it. They expect results. So and then the last thing I want to say on this, NGOs are worse than government in this regard because you have none of the safeguards. They're still getting their money from you against your will. And they have all of the additional expenses that are the keystone of why government does everything worse than the private sector does it. Anytime you want to do a thing with government, anytime you want to spend $1, it costs you $3 to spend it because you got to hire somebody to keep track of that dollar, and then somebody to spend the dollar, and then somebody to study what the dollar did. You got all these extra layers of bureaucracy administration. So everything that a person does in the private sector, if the government does the same thing, it comes with a team of bureaucrats that just double and triple the cost of whatever it is. I don't care if you're talking about delivering pizza, building roads, or assembling an army to conduct kinetic operations. As soon as you get government involved, you triple the cost of that thing. Yeah. And there are a lot of reasons for that we can get into the weeds on later. But that's why it's the distinction is so important. And then what happens with the NGOs? This is your nonprofits, your churches, your company outreach, all that. What happens with the NGOs? The way they work, they get some of that private sector donation money, and some of that's big money. Some of that's George Soros pumping $1 billion in, right? Some of it's giant government grants, but basically the NGOs, there are tiers of NGOs. So you'll have the one great big one. The example I gave Mario earlier, you'll have like a giant climate change involved NGO, bunch of climate alarmists that don't actually believe in shit. They just want the money. They get $1 billion grant from the government. And then what they do is they pay themselves, they pay their executives, they pay their staff, they pay the bills, they keep the lights on, they buy advertising to.
They pay themselves handsomely as well, I might add.
Oh yeah. The old joke is the March of Dimes is called the March of Dimes because for every dollar you donate, they spend a dime on the cause.
Yep.
And then what happens is the bigger ones, they don't actually spend any money to speak of on the cause that they're structured for. Instead, they go and select the next tier. So the big climate change NGO says, okay, here's a solar power NGO, here's a wind NGO, here's an anti-oil business lobbying NGO, and they take the money that's left over after they've paid themselves and they put it down to those guys. And then those next lower tier NGOs, they do the same thing. They pay themselves, they pay their expenses, and then they take the remainder and they distribute it down to the next tier of NGOs. And that cycle, it's trickled down money laundering.
Right.
And then when it gets to the bottom, you got one guy at the bottom who pays himself, does a little advertising, spreads the message, gets some more private donations coming into the top. And very rarely are they spending anywhere near what they're taking in on what they do.
Right. And like you were saying with that hierarchy, okay, of big NGOs and then, second tier, third tier, fourth tier, et cetera, all, basically an umbrella of that larger NGO. Another thing that makes them so effective is that they can dissolve and reorganize easily, like at will, because they are nebulous like that. Okay. And another,
they have to file one government document to establish that new 501c3, maybe two, so that it's a new 501c3 with a separate attached LLC.
Right. And of course, people within the IRS will just rubber stamp it. Okay. There's not going to be any heavy scrutiny on it, unless of course it's a conservative NGO, but like anything.
Vis-a-vis Lois Lerner.
Yeah, exactly. So they a lot of this is the reason why you see endless lawfare. Okay. Because you can, a subsidiary of an NGO can file suit against someone, and if it doesn't go through or gets thrown out in court, there can just be continuous lawsuits, okay, and challenges filed by other NGOs. It's like it's an endless whack-a-mole, okay, where you cannot stop all the legal challenges, and it ties up your efforts and the money of, say, private companies or right-wing organizations. Not that there are many, because they can't get funding, can't even get bank accounts. Okay, but yeah, you're fighting an endless, nebulous army of organizations that can continuously file suit against you from seemingly different directions. So it's a new legal challenge that has to be dealt with and tackled independently. Whereas you can't consolidate it all. What you would want is like some type of way to use RICO law against non-governmental organizations to take it straight to the top, the head organization. But I'm not sure anyone's figured that out yet.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of RICO law.
Neither am I. It destroyed the Italian mafia.
RICO was essentially created. The whole RICO concept was essentially created to arrest people that you didn't have any probable cause for arresting by saying that they were involved with somebody who you did have probable cause on. And there's a good argument to be made that your Al Capones are out there, but we just saw it twisted with Trump, and they actually went backwards with it. They said, okay, we think Trump's a criminal, and therefore everybody he's ever met or worked or who has ever worked for him is a criminal. And they went in reverse with RICO. But as long as the RICO law is out there and we're fighting an enemy that is happy to use lawfare, like I would never consider being a suicide bomber, but I'm happy to pull the trigger if I'm being attacked by one. If you don't recognize and adapt to the tactics of the enemy, then the enemy will be victorious in conflict.
We needed our own. We needed our own. Billionaire, our own billionaire, our own Soros, to help finance and spearhead some of this, the pushback against this stuff, because it's all been one-sided. With Elon, you get the hope, okay, that maybe conservative or right-wing organizations might finally get the financing and funding and professionalization they need to actually fight back. So that's why that's kind of my hope for Elon Musk, is that we've got someone with fuck you money finally on our side. You know what I mean? Whereas before we did not. And if we did, they were cowards and wouldn't get in the game. So let's talk about
Elon Musk says we should unwind the NGO industry. Non-governmental organizations receiving taxpayer dollars are under scrutiny for misusing funds in shady operations. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, set to lead the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, have announced plans to investigate how taxpayer funds are funneled into NGOs. And that funneled into NGOs, that's another thing. Like we've talked about, the right does not have NGOs to speak of, right? There is no Planned Parenthood of the right. The left, we've seen people like AOC jump up and say, oh, we need to defund these evil right-wing organizations, make sure no taxpayer money is going into the NRA. Never been any taxpayer money going into the NRA. It's a private organization, and it's entirely funded by private donations.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of criticism to be heaped at the NRA, but as far as this goes, the NRA is privately funded. There is no tax money going to the NRA. The NRA does take the money that is donated to it and uses it to lobby the government for particular outcomes, theoretically, those that are friendly to the Second Amendment. But unlike groups like Planned Parenthood, it doesn't then get money back. So a group like Planned Parenthood spends a massive amount of their intake, of their revenue, on
straight kickbacks,
on basically funding political campaigns to friendly Democrat politicians who in turn go in and try to loosen regulations and expand abortion to baby killing is a huge business. This is another place that the NGOs are a problem. And I'm going to let Mario take over after we get through the article a little bit and talk about the involvement of the NGOs with the cartels. But on the subject of Planned Parenthood is a money laundering operation where Democrats funnel taxpayer money and grants into Planned Parenthood, and then Planned Parenthood donates part of that money back into the Democrat Party to help get those Democrats elected and reelected, who then repeat the cycle. They lather, rinse, repeat. And then Planned Parenthood has been caught on camera more than once over the last 10 years, admitting that part of their business model is that they're conducting abortions, they're mutilating children, and then to the greatest extent possible, they're recovering the intact corpses of these murdered babies so that they can harvest healthy organs and healthy material from these murdered children and sell that. And we're not talking about black market shit. They're selling it to research departments and universities, right? And something that I want you guys to understand is where I was talking about the tie-in with the cartels here. The cartels that are involved heavily in human trafficking that's been actively supported and funded and facilitated by the Biden administration and Alejandro Mayorkas, they're bringing in kids to be abused. And then after the kid's been so worn out that they don't have market value anymore at around 13 or 14 years old, they take them back to South America and Mexico to breeding farms where they get them pregnant, smuggle them back into America where they get an abortion precisely for the purpose of harvesting the organs from the child. That is part of the human trafficking industry that is not getting talked about nearly enough. We've talked about the Uyghur Muslims in China.
They're slaves.
they're slaves, and they're slaves in their best cases, and then they're being used for organ harvesting as well.
They're cattle, I guess, more so.
Yeah, and that's happening in America as well, with trafficked children. They start them off 4, 5, 6 years old to be abused. We'll just use that term for our purposes here. And then when they've been used up, then they get cycled into the breeding program to generate organs for organ harvesting. So let's get back through. Let's get through the article a bit more, and then Mario, I want you to expound on the connection between Mayorkas and the NGOs and the cartels.
Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, yes.
So let's begin with an exchange between Musk and Ramaswamy on X 1 week ago. We need to scrutinize U.S. government funding of non-government organizations. It's an oxymoron that represents a waste of taxpayer dollars, but the real problem runs deeper. Americans deserve transparency on opaque foreign aid and nonprofit groups abetting our own border crisis, Ramaswamy said. While quoting another ex-user who explained how Victoria Nuland, appointed to the board of directors of the National Endowment, funded overseas NGOs involved in questionable activities in Georgia, Ukraine, and Syria. And that bit, the non-government organization, in scare quotes, as he says, taxpayer dollars there. Remember during the YouTube adpocalypse, this is before we had the Twitter files and the Facebook files and everything else, where we got incontrovertible proof that members of the intelligence community and the Biden administration and the Hillary campaign had been not only directly in contact and in communication with YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc., and actively telling them to censor stuff. Before we even knew that, I was making the case in the argument back then that many of these large tech companies operate on so much government capital, so much government grant money and endowment money, that the idea that they should be treated as private businesses for the purpose of questions like Section 242. Anyway, they should be treated as if what they do is not a government action. So you've got these YouTube, etc. They were started on government money, and they still are beholden to that money in a substantial way. So if the government asks them to do something, their compelling interest there is so substantial that they need to be treated legally as government agents, which means that if any one of those organizations engages in censorship of free speech, then it should be treated as if the Congress itself, the government itself, is censoring that speech.
Yeah.
So part of what they're doing with several of these NGOs like Media Matters that I mentioned earlier is, and it's the same thing with all of the social media platforms that had government entanglement. The government is using them to do the things that they're legally forbidden to do. So, Mario, did you have something else on the article before you get into Mayorkas and the cartels?
Well, yeah, you can, where it says Newland, in charge of that, basically appointed as the board of directors for the National Endowment. The National Endowment is, exactly like you stated earlier, one of the main umbrellas that funnels the money down to the secondary and tertiary organizations. All right, and yes, questionable activities in Georgia, Ukraine, and Syria. Anytime you see NGOs operating in a foreign country, it's almost exclusively to undermine the government. They're always put in place as basically a form of like proxy legal and activist warfare against regimes that are not favorable to the people currently holding power in Washington. Ukraine, and in that way, they function exactly like the CIA would operate in the good old days of Banana Republic toppling. Ukraine being the most egregious example, and Syria also. Syria, where non-governmental organizations are basically directly financing terrorism in Syria by providing weapons to, essentially cavemen because Assad bad, therefore anyone else is good. Which in the Middle East, nothing is that simple. So, no, continue with the article if you wanted to.
No. I think we're good with the article. The article doesn't say anything else that I haven't already touched on.
Right. Okay.
So
probably the most egregious example.
Yes.
Okay, if you look at the invasion, okay, of the global South, okay, whether it's Africans and Middle Easterners being ferried across the Mediterranean to Europe, okay, or caravans of migrants being ferried from anywhere in South America through Central America to our border, okay, non-governmental that would not exist were it not for non-governmental organizations operating, okay, under the
and
guise
that played a
of
huge role in
humanitarianism and charity. All right.
Right, and the French government just fell last week. Was essentially just disintegrated last week.
Mm-hmm.
And the import of hostile foreign nationals is a huge contributor to that. These NGOs make that happen.
No, the import of foreign nationals is a huge reason why Macron won re-election. Okay, or was able to hold on to power. The reason that government toppled is basically 48% of the French want zero immigration, period, legal or illegal or otherwise. Okay, they you have to understand it. A brief aside: in Europe's a little different than the United States. In Europe, it is illegal to be right wing. The Republican, the MAGA, okay, or MEGA, Make Europe Great Again, is illegal. Okay, even in Germany, they're trying to ban the Alternative for Deutschland, the only right wing party that exists in the country that wants severe restrictions on immigration, that wants to remigrate, okay, individuals back to their home countries. The German parliament is going to take a vote, I believe, this month on just outright banning them as a party and making it illegal to be a member. All right. France, what happened in France in that last election was you had a coalition between Macron, who is in theory like the centrist party, okay, teaming up with the radical left and like 2 degrees of radical left, like the socialist, and then just the outright communists. All right. Teaming up with them and not running candidates in areas where it would have split the vote, just to ensure that Marine Le Pen and I forgot the name of the party. It's whatever, the French Patriot Party, to ensure that they could not take power, despite winning like 96% of the counties in the European parliamentary elections just a month prior. Okay, clearly not the will of the people. So anyway. So, like we're saying, all human trafficking to Europe and the United States, this invasion from the global South, is financed, directed, and controlled by non-governmental organizations. All of those boats that you see operating in the Mediterranean that are just picking up people they're not even making an effort to cross the Mediterranean anymore. They just stage them off the coast in little rubber rafts and dinghies, and the NGO ships will just come and pick them up. All right. This is being done under the guise, like I said, of humanitarianism. But what it really is, if the governments in Europe wanted it to stop, and all governments in Europe at this point are in fact traitors to their own people, it could stop overnight. They could just stop paying for it, or stop allowing them safe harbor when they come back up north. Europe's another story though, similar to our situation but different. But let's get back to our border. Okay, the worst NGO, the most egregious NGO operating in the capacity for human trafficking to the United States is HIAS, okay, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Okay, this is their sole purpose is to assist or outright just ferry refugees, okay, which is a broad term, to the United States. Now, under the Trump administration, they were in fact downsizing. Okay, they didn't have nearly the operational funds that they had during the Obama administration, and they were pretty much kind of just kept on ice. After Biden seized the election, or after the Democrats seized the election in 2020, then you started seeing activity going on gangbuster style with HIAS. All right, they started expanding. They were receiving tons of grants from the government and from private organizations, and they were creating an infrastructure to more quickly facilitate the ferrying of just lumpen humanity to our border. You've heard of the Darien Gap, right? Which is in Panama, I believe. Okay, it's a particularly hostile jungle area where you have to like traverse through to get to to get up into Mexico. They set up essentially like they set up a camp there. Okay, like a in processing camp. Think of it like a MEPS, even if you want to. Okay, just preparing soldiers for their journey north, right?
Yeah, you duck walking
Yeah.
draws.
You got to you got to give them their shots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the huge processing facility in Darien Gap, right at the most dangerous point of passage, right, to sort of facilitate that. And like when you they show you on TV, it's like, oh no, there's another caravan coming, and you see this like endless wave of brown people walking down the street, right? Well, those people they're not walking all the way from Venezuela to our border, okay? They're doing that kind of shit they're doing that shit for a photo op, all right? And then once the cameras are done taking their pictures, okay, and you get your fear porn coverage, they get back on the buses, okay, that are continuing to ferry them north. And who's paying for those buses? Of course, non-governmental organizations, in particular HIAS, all right? HIAS runs effectively private prisons on the border, where they're in processing centers for people who are just given like blanket proviso statements and to allow them to reside within the country until a court date at a later date. They're running private prisons. James O'Keefe from OMG Media has done a great job trying to expose these people by just like showing up at the door and asking them questions. And the way that they operate, let's just say it would lend to your extreme suspicion of what's going on behind those gates. Okay, probably a lot of human trafficking and the worst aspects of it, of slavery, using people as cattle, drug running, etc. But yeah, the HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, runs a large collection of facilities on the southern border. Okay, basically providing aid and support from the very beginning of the migrants' journey all the way to getting their papers prepared and getting them their Obama phones, getting them their EBT cards and everything else in coordination with the federal government once they get here, preparing them to be good little fourth generational warriors, directly attacking the population at large. All right.
Well, we got this article from News Nation. From the local to state and federal level, Americans are paying a hefty price for the humanitarian crisis at the southern border. Yada, yada, yada. Past 2 years, Border Patrol holding stations have constantly been at overcapacity in dealing with the massive influx of migrants crossing illegally into the U.S. When this happens, Border Patrol releases processed migrants to NGOs to shelter, feed, and coordinate travel for migrants to their final destination. So when you're told that illegal immigrants don't get welfare from taxpayers, for one, that's a lie, and for two, it's a double lie, because they do get welfare and government services, and then also they get these NGO services that are funded by us. Like according to Forbes, the NGO Catholic Charities USA received $1.4 billion for government support. This is in 2023. I'm sorry, this is 2021. Support compared with $1 billion in private donations. So $2.4 billion of American money going into Catholic Charities, who I guarantee is not spending that much on the refugees. They're spending a hell of a lot of that on some multi-million-dollar payouts to their C-suite and the like. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, they're Lutheran, so because they worship Lucifer, reported more than $93.1 million in U.S. government grants, making taxpayer-funded grants more than 80% of its total support. And that number would only climb as the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services received $182.6 million in grants in the fiscal year of 2022 from the Department of Health and Human Services. So, I mean, they're basically just straight tax money laundering operations, and they're laundering your tax money into operations which are paying people to conduct the activity of undermining your country, of importing hostile foreign nationals to work actively to collapse your economy. And so, like the individual hostile foreign invader doesn't understand that that's what he's doing. What he understands is we're going to pay you to be here.
There's another
What he
degree.
doesn't understand is the long chain of abuse that it takes to put that dollar in his hand, and the millions of dollars that are earned by the people or acquired by the people. Right? You got the big grant, and it gets a little bit smaller, and it gets a little bit smaller, and it gets a little bit smaller, until you've made a dozen millionaires and handed this refugee $1.
Yeah, it's like you're probably wondering, like, why would you want these people who are illiterate in their own native language here? What economic capacity could these people possibly provide? Well, that's exactly what they provided. A lot of people made money off of just getting them here. Okay, a lot of money exchanged hand for every body across that border. Probably there's a chain of custody of a lot of people who got paid, just like you said. Now, and think of it, there's another layer of criminality here involved. All right, it's not just ferrying hostile foreign invaders and letting them illegally cross the border. Also, think about the terrain that these people are passing through in Mexico, right? On their long journey to the United States. Who is actually in control of those border states in Mexico? It's not the Mexican government. It's the cartels. Okay, so.
Correct.
There is no possibility that these NGOs are not working directly, or at least paying protection money or whatever. There must be some type of financial understanding between the cartels and the larger NGOs like HIAS, okay, to continue this invasion of people to our border. There's no conceivable way that would not be a possibility. Cartels would not allow such large-scale activity to occur within their territory without either taxing people for it or using it as a vehicle to profit themselves. Sex trafficking, drug distribution, etc. So
think about it like this: go buy
working
yourself
with the cartels.
Think about it like this: try to go buy yourself a bag of meth, break it down into smaller baggies so you can sell little one-hitter doses, and pick a notorious gang area and try to go set up shop there. See how that works out for you, right? That's what's happening. That's what's happening at the border with the cartels. Is these American-backed NGOs are going down there and they're like, "Hey, we're going to do the crime that you guys like to do. Y'all cool with that?" We came to open a Burger King across the street from your McDonald's. Everybody cool?
For sure.
Like Ray Kroc used to say, if they're going to drown, you put a hose in their mouth.
Isn't that a Warren Zevon song?
Yeah, no, not Warren Zevon. It's Mark.
Whatever.
Mark Tupac. Damn.
I don't remember. It's a good song.
Go ahead, talk about cartels.
Well, I don't really, I'm not an expert on the cartels. Okay. What I will say though is
Mark Knopfler.
Knopfler. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess
Dire Straits, the lead singer from Dire Straits, they did the I Want My MTV, and he spun off and did solo projects.
So the incoming Trump administration has talked a lot of game about effectively declaring war against the cartels. I sincerely hope that happens, and I mean it. I mean literally. I want to see a Mexican meth or fentanyl super lab. Okay, just get lit up in an airstrike, explode, create catastrophic chemical fires, and turn an entire section of and turn like a square mile. Okay, into just a radioactive, chemically contaminated hazmat fucking site.
Mario, did you ever get a chance to fire a 40 Mike into a meth lab or an IED factory?
40 Mike? No, sadly, I wasn't that cool.
Oh, that's that's one of those experiences that just makes it hard to roll out of bed for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
you think back on it, and get a little tear.
Yeah, I've seen someone else firing it live. Okay, just it looks like the closest thing to a video game in war as you can imagine, where it's like you lead them with the grenades.
Well, that's a Mark 19. It fires 40 Mikes. I did it out of an M203.
Okay, got it. No, I have
or I'm sorry, an M320. It's like the 203, but it's side breech instead of slide breech.
Oh, that's cool.
But, oh yeah, have you not seen the M320s? Those things are
I never
rock
seen that.
solid.
No.
I had an LT downrange that fashioned. He made a holster for his M320 because like an M203, you can't. It's not a standalone weapon. It has to be barrel mounted. But the M320. Okay, this is way off topic, but you haven't seen one of these. I got to show you this, Mario.
As far as I'm concerned, the M16A2 with a 203 on it is the most aesthetically pleasing. Full 20-inch barrel is the most aesthetically pleasing weapon that we've ever fielded in the United States Army.
I will partially agree with that, and then I'll say
I know the M4 is more practical, but
no. The aesthetically pleasing. This is the M320. You see what I'm showing you?
Yeah.
It's side breeches, and it's got its own handle and buttstock, but it's got the reverse Picatinny. So this mounts on the bottom of your barrel, but you could take it off and use it as a standalone weapon platform.
That is super cool.
So we had this LT that wore it like a sidearm, and he boom. Great piece of equipment. Okay, so sorry about that. Massive derailment. I apologize for that. But you were saying basically the cartels don't like competition.
Isn't there a lady in your life you should wish happy birthday to today, Chris?
Oh, and happy birthday to you too, Mario. But I generally don't do birthday shout outs on air for OPSEC.
I didn't mean me. Okay, I got you. Okay. All right. So, I don't know. Is there anything else in that article, or are we?
No, I think we pretty much got it. Yeah. I don't know. Let me ask the chat. Do you guys actively hate all NGOs now? Because if most of you will say yes to that, then I think we've pretty much done our job this morning.
So Be Controversial says that refugee is a word that has been abused. It almost has no meaning now. Yeah, there's lots of words like that, like racist or anti-Semite.
And woman. That's the basic operating, the SOP for the left is to abuse and mutilate my precious sacred language. Yeah. And mutate it into something that's unrecognizable and unserviceable. It's one of the great problems with the whole controversy of the LGBT, especially the trans issue. I need you to use my pronouns. I'm a miss, not a mister. Okay, that's interesting. That's not a pronoun. That's a salutation.
Yep.
Pronouns, by definition, are words you use when you're referring to a third party in their absence. And so if you're insisting that I use your pronouns, you're attempting to police my speech in your absence. And no, you can get absolutely bent over that. Hell no. But that's global cooling, global warming, ice age, peak oil. You're just saying words. You're abusing the words. And it was and the point is that nobody can communicate effectively with one another when you've constantly got some pink-headed shit lib interrupting you to say, "Oh, that's not a very sensitive use of the language." Shut up, retard.
Jordan
you know what
Peterson.
the word means?
Yeah.
If you understood my meaning, then your level of offense is beyond irrelevant. Your level of offense, and especially your interrupting. I don't know about y'all, but I teach my kids not to interrupt. Right? The wife and I are in the middle of a conversation about the grocery list and getting ready to go to the store. One of the kids runs up with, "Hey, mommy, look at the stop motion animation I made on my iPad," while she's mid-sentence, "And you will do push-ups."
But Lowry, we're the good people, okay? It's in our name. That means that you are the bad people, okay? It's ontological. You just need to understand. You have to believe. They want
You're
you to.
talking
They
about
want
people
they,
whose ontology includes unicorns that are not rhinoceri.
right. Yeah. Well, they want you to believe they're proselytizing. They're horrible. They're horrible at proselytizing their religion. Okay. They do it through threats of intimidation. Lemon pound cakes.
Okay, I gotta say a couple things to wrap this up. Lincoln says, "Good morning, Mr. Chris." Good morning, Lincoln. And Megan says, "So I gotta talk a little bit about this real quick." And Mario, you might be interested. Lincoln, one of my buddy's kids, said that he wanted to try MREs. So we were watching.
I got 5 minutes, but yes, go ahead.
We were watching the Tremors movies this weekend, and Burt Gummer always has like caches of MREs with him and talks about how it's the most nutrient dense preservable food. Da, 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 da. And Mario, you know about MREs. I know about MREs. We've had some MREs. Be Controversial knows about some MREs. He misses the lemon pound cakes from the MREs. And I told Lincoln, maybe after Sergeant Major gets back in town, we can get together at the farm. We'll order a case of MREs and shoot a YouTube video with these boys that are around 10 years old trying MREs for the first time with some grizzled old veterans. Yeah. If the timing works out, Mario, you ought to ride up and join us for that. We'll eat some MREs with the kids and shoot some guns and play on the farm. And
I didn't experience like that. I had an experience like that with my daughters. Last year, we're coming back from the beach, and all three of them are in the back, and they're like, "We're hungry, we're hungry." The older sister starts saying it, and then the younger sisters start, amplifying it and whining even more. I'm like, okay, look under the bench seat, okay, pull out those 2 brown bags, right? They do 2 MREs, and I'm like, okay, there's a knife. Don't tell your mom. There's a knife, the side compartment there. Sophia, go ahead, open them up, right? So they do. They open them up and they start. Oh, they're all excited. Like, look, it's a bag of trees. Look at this. Look at the wonder, right? They start digging into it, open them up, and they start tasting, each sharing their brown spoons, tasting it. And they're like, "Dad, it's not good." I'm like, I know it's not
good. This isn't food, Dad. What are you doing to us? They start fatty cakes or disgusting little fat pills or yummy tasty burgers.
the white frosting and rainbow sprinkled pound cake. They thought that was okay.
Honestly, the
Mexican corn.
I miss the jalapeno cheese spread.
Yeah,
the jalapeno cheese spread with the wheat cracker.
Yeah, that is solid. Also, if you, for me, the golden bag, okay, like the golden ticket, was if you got a wheat snack bread, a peanut butter, and a raspberry jam in the same packet. That's good FTX eating.
Yeah, it's funny. I spent a year in Afghanistan. I've only ever eaten MREs in training. Never had to mess with them downrange. I always had a case of them. I always had a case of them with me just in case. But we always either ate on the local economy or at a DFAC at one of the cops or fobs. Never had to break open an MRE until one day I went to smoke a cigarette and my lighter didn't work. I had to bust open an MRE to get matches.
Yep.
I opened one MRE in 1 year in Afghanistan just for the matches.
Or for an emergency ass wipe.
Yeah. Yes. Or the gum. Dude, I would see other soldiers eating MREs, and I'd ask them if they wanted their gum, and I'd hoard that shit because brother got to stay regular.
No, I hoarded the little Tabascos. Those were currency.
Oh, hell yeah.
Little Tabascos.
Be Controversial says same. Yes, same. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this morning. Mario, you're coming back tomorrow for a special show that you're working on today, right?
What's it about? Oh, yes, Syria. Yes. I for the audience, I called Chris last night. I'm like, hey, I want to do a show on Thursday, and he's like, yeah, well, what are we doing tomorrow? I'm like, come on, dude, you can't. You're getting overextended here. I need to set up.
Live is hard mode. I got every morning, every day. I've got to figure out what I'm talking about this morning.
Yeah.
Sometimes I figure it out. Sometimes I go to bed at night. I already know what I'm going to be talking about. Sometimes I've set the show up and I already know what I'm doing tomorrow morning. I've already got the thumbnail built and everything. But every day of the week, right, the show is between 30 minutes and an hour typically. And it typically takes 3 to 4 hours of work to set it up.
Well, you've got the ability to just put you in front of the camera and just flip the switch and just do stream of consciousness for like 30 minutes straight. No,
yeah.
You know what I mean? You can just gab it up.
And there are not yesterday, Monday. That's what I did. I picked a topic. I knew just enough to talk about it. And Monday I had a late start and I just, it took me 20 minutes to put together the thumbnail and the description and pull up a couple of articles. And I just read the articles and just kind of spitballed off of it. But a show like this one this morning, I got a couple hours on the phone with Mario last night doing the pre-show, discussing what the topic was going to be. And then, of course, this morning, you got the thumbnail, got the description, find the articles to support the claims, and all that.
Yep.
Not really find the articles to support the claims. Mario sent me an article. I read it, and then I pulled up articles about the things referenced in the article so that we could verify and fact check things.
Right. Yeah, don't let everyone in the kitchen, Lowry. Okay, there's got to be some mystery. All right.
Speaking of the kitchen, that's where I make my coffee, and you can click the link below to buy me a coffee and help support the show. And hopefully, we'll start making enough money that I can tell Mario to quit his job, and we can go and start doing 3 hours every morning.
Only if I get to construct a cuck shed on your property and live there as a hermit.
Done.
Okay.
Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you. Oh, that's the wrong button. We will see you tomorrow.